Hey everyone, and welcome to the Grow and Go podcast, where we address the topics that matter right now so you can grow your caregiving knowledge and go forward with confidence. Today's expert is Kim Estes. Kim is certified as a specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law by the Ohio State Bar Association. She's a partner at O'Diam Estess Law Group in Dayton, Ohio, where she focuses on estate planning and administration, guardianships, Medicaid and nursing home planning, asset protection, special needs planning, and elder law. Kim is incredibly knowledgeable about caregiver issues, and I was able to ask her a variety of questions that are really top of mind for many caregivers. With everything going on right now via the COVID-19 pandemic, I think this episode is a must listen, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks, Kim, for joining us for the third episode now of the Grow and Go podcast. I really appreciate you taking some time today.
Good to be here.
So the first thing I want to do before we get into really some more of the specific questions on issues, maybe just take a little bit of time and share with us a little bit about the role you play as an elder care attorney and how you typically balance that role between, say, client, I think you would refer to them as, and then the family caregivers, which is typically our audience.
So that's actually a hot topic in elder law, kind of, is the attorney-client privilege and who is the client, because sometimes certainly we're being contacted by the caregiver. And so am I representing the caregiver in their capacity of trying to get help for the family member, or am I actually representing the family member? So that's something we have to try to hammer out. But whenever possible, we try to take kind of a team approach and just be involved with everybody. And so right now, as we're planning remotely, we're doing a lot of meetings on Zoom. And so I'm having the caregiver go and sit at mom or dad's house and kind of have the conversation. And even if it's more so I'm talking with the caregiver, at least I know that my client, if that's typically my client is the older adult, is still there and they're present and they're engaged to the extent that they're able to be. And so that's something I have to kind of balance and gauge how much can they be involved, what level of involvement is appropriate, and things like that.
And so from a broad stroke, 30,000 foot view, like what's the typical role? I mean, what are you guys typically helping clients with?
We do whole picture, the wide spectrum. So elder law encompasses estate planning generally. So talking about getting somebody's will or trust set up, and then financial powers of attorney, healthcare powers of attorney, those kinds of important legal documents you need to have, and then everything that falls under that. And then on sort of the other side of the spectrum, we do long-term care planning too. So a lot of people hear Medicaid planning tossed around, nursing home planning, asset protection planning, and that can look like anything from helping somebody that's in a nursing home, their funds are depleted, we're just going to help them file an application to receive Medicaid benefits, all the way to big picture where somebody's maybe just got an early diagnosis of something and they have a sizable estate that they want to try to protect, and we do more asset protection type planning in those scenarios. So run the gamut. Same thing with the estate planning side of things. We do all the way from just a very simple will all the way up to complex tax planning, trusts, and things like that.
It's interesting. Yeah, you don't think about some of those things, at times, right? And that's, it's interesting too, because our audience, those are the things that oftentimes cause the most stress, a lot of those financially related topics between siblings. One of the things we like to do prior to all these interviews is we like to post to the caregiving.com community and just ask folks if they have any questions for our upcoming experts. And this time, Terry, a follower on Facebook, asked for some coaching around sibling disagreement to, say, a power of attorney. There's obviously a lot of concern for family caregivers right now, especially those caring for an elderly loved one. And as a result, there can be a lot of stress and, say, even infighting. So how would you coach, Terry, or really any other family that may have this stressful dynamic between siblings, when maybe one has the power of attorney and the others don't?
The best thing I tell people all the time is that communication is key. And I have a background in journalism too, so I'm big on that anyway. But being open and honest, full disclosure when you're doing that, and remembering that, everybody's stressed. We have to think about those things and kind of take everything that's said with a grain of salt and remember, okay, where is this coming from? It wasn't maybe intended to be mean. Let's give people the benefit of the doubt, but having conversations and being full disclosure about everything. So I saw it I've seen it in my own family. I've seen it in clients' situations. And so often what you said is absolutely true, that people are so stressed, the emotions are running high. And sometimes it goes back to even like deep rooted childhood issues of, oh, you picked on me as a kid and now I have the power of attorney. So this is my chance to get, I don't think people know that at what they're doing, but we really do see it happen. And so we sometimes play the role. It's attorneys and counselors at law. And sometimes we're in there kind of mediating these situations and helping people kind of just pull in the reins and remember what the goal here is. And even if there's differing perspectives and viewpoints about how to do it, we have a common goal. And it's important to kind of get back to that square one of we need to be protecting mom or dad and keeping their best interest at the center of everything. So the communication piece is really key though.
So that's, that's the tip, the challenge that Terry refers to is the challenge that kind of arises, maybe when things change or opinions changed after the fact. Is there a way preemptively to sort of anticipate that these disagreements are going to occur, when we're setting up that power of attorney? Is there a better approach to, say, just giving all the power to this one person? And
that's going to be really family specific, I think. And one thing I talk to my clients about all the time is there's this misconception that you need to just put your oldest child in charge of everything, right? So I'm going to just go, well, that's the oldest, and then we're going to go down birth order when we're assigning responsibilities. And I really try to discourage that because I've seen it blow up so many times. And so we try to have a really detailed conversation with clients when we're planning about, okay, this is what this responsibility actually is. So being the financial power of attorney, these are the duties that that person's going to have. And then over here, you're going to have a medical power of attorney. And that person needs to be one that can make hard decisions and that's going to be stable in a crisis more so. That's almost the more emotional, fluffy piece of it, if you will. And so sometimes if we're looking at dividing responsibilities, that's a good line in the sand where somebody can be the financial decision maker, somebody else can be the healthcare decision maker, and putting the right person in the right role can really go a long way. And then I always encourage a family meeting when you're doing the planning. Not everybody listens to me, but hey, let's talk about this. This is the plan we put in place and this is why. And if you have those conversations up front, I do think it kind of can nip some of that fighting down the road because everybody understood and had the opportunity to discuss it when the plan was being made.
Interesting. So what are, so we're talking about planning now. What should the focus be for caregivers right now? So we're trying to get our legal house in order, if you will.
Yeah.
What should be the real focus, say top 10 or so, or it doesn't have to have a number, but what should the focus be for caregivers?
So everybody needs to have just like a estate planning toolbox in their arsenal. And the main things that any plan has to have in order to be effective is going to be at least a will. Sometimes a trust is going to be more effective, and that's going to be situational and just depend on goals. A lot of people have this common misconception that you have to have a certain amount of money to need to have a trust plan, and that's really not true. In the past, when people did planning, a lot of times when they were using trusts, they were using them because of estate taxes. And that's not really an issue anymore. Ohio doesn't have an estate tax here anymore. The federal estate tax only applies if somebody has more than $11.5 million in their name when they pass away. So a lot of families aren't worried about that. But trust planning goes way beyond the taxes. So if you have a child with special needs, you need to have a trust to protect that beneficiary. If you have a child with a drug addiction or a spending problem, you might want to use a trust to protect their inheritance through that. So that really becomes a goal-specific thing, whether we're planning with a trust or planning with a will. And then beyond that, having powers of attorney, which is your lifetime planning. So the will and the trust I would classify as those are your death plans. This is what's going to happen and how I want things to operate after I pass away. But arguably even more important is how things are going to operate while you're still here. And that's where the powers of attorney come in to make sure you have a decision maker in place that's going to carry out decisions the way you would want them to be made. And so that's done on the financial side with a financial power of attorney. It should be called a durable general power of attorney. So a general document allowing somebody to do kind of any of your financial decision making. And you want to have the word durable in that when it's being used in the title of the document. So durable means that the document continues even upon the person who signed it becoming incapacitated. And isn't that exactly when we want a power of attorney, right? So if I sign one today, sure, my husband can go act for me right now because that's convenient. But if I get sick and I actually need him to, it has to be durable in order for him to continue to act on my behalf. And then a
Interesting.
healthcare power of attorney is going to be, very important too for somebody to be able to make those medical decisions for you if you can't do that for yourself. And then we typically pair that healthcare power of attorney with a living will declaration, which is kind of your end of life decision making. And that's actually a document that a person outlines themselves what their intentions are. So whereas the healthcare power of attorney is giving somebody else the ability to decide, the living will declaration is you saying for yourself, if there is no hope, you've tried everything, I don't want you to take any kind of extraordinary measures to keep me alive at that point. So not everybody has that document, but it typically gets paired with that healthcare power of attorney.
Okay. Now, do any of those things relate to one of the terms we refer to or hear a lot about here is an advance directive? Does
Mhm.
this at all relate to that
Yeah,
document? Or is
yeah.
that
Those
sort of
healthcare directives that we're talking about are typically what you hear referred to as your advanced directives.
okay?
And so they'll ask you, anytime you go to the hospital, do you have a healthcare power of attorney and a living will, or do you have your advanced directives? Those are the things they're talking about.
Right.
And something I also counsel clients about, anytime you go to the hospital, take those legal documents with you, because if you don't, sometimes they'll ask you to sign a new one. The hospital has a, 2-page version of that form or something, and that can actually revoke the one that your attorney prepared for you. So you want to be careful to make sure you're not signing a new one and accidentally screwing up the plan that you paid good money for.
Interesting. So living will, and one of the topics that's floating around a lot or swirling around a lot, in these days of COVID-19, and we're working from home and we're avoiding social contact. The one medical device everyone in America is familiar with now and is receiving more attention than normal is the ventilator.
Yeah.
So it's my understanding that there is common language typically in a living will that states that in the event the living will is activated, like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
that you do not wish to be put on a ventilator and you'd like to be allowed to pass away naturally.
Yeah.
So how does this language affect somebody's ability now to receive this treatment in the event that they need it in case of, say, COVID-19?
So what you have to understand is that the living will is not kicking in eh, until it's a very extreme circumstance. So while that living will is saying, yes, just let me die naturally, if the living will has kicked in, we have to get to that point first. So what I understand happens in most of these COVID cases is somebody is still, got a fighting chance when they're going on a ventilator. So we're not yet to that point of using the living will. So where I see that fitting into the puzzle is if somebody's unconscious or they're sedated or whatnot, then it may be their healthcare power of attorney that authorizes the ventilator. And the living will might only get used if you get to the point where the standard is 2 physicians have agreed there is nothing else they can do to help this person. So you have to get to that point where they're willing to say you are permanently unconscious and terminally ill before that living will kicks in. So what I'm counseling clients about is more often than not, if you're not making the decision saying, yes, give me the ventilator, then your healthcare power of attorney is the one that's going to have to make that call. And so talking to people about that, is that your adult child that's going to have to decide that for you? If it is, or if it's your spouse and then you have adult children that are involved, are they going to have differing opinions about those things? And that takes you back to that family conversation. Let's have a meeting. And I mean, gosh, we can't all get together right now, maybe. So let's all sit down on Zoom and have happy hour and talk about ventilators. Sounds super
Right.
fun. But I mean, seriously, it's a conversation you need to have. And I do think I've seen family dynamics when people are talking about life support and things like that. And the spouse and the kids might have different opinions about what happens. And so making sure that everybody is on the same page about what mom or dad's intentions are, that's going to go a long way in alleviating some of that friction and making sure that the intentions are actually carried out.
All right. Just make sure we're all communicating, because if
Mhm.
we're concerned about this topic as a family, we should address it, talk to mom about it, and talk to dad about it, and just say, hey, this is something that happens as a result sometimes of diagnosis of this thing. So let's talk about what it all means and what we're going to do.
And it's so easy to
Um,
bury your head in the sand. I mean, we see that a lot. People don't want to talk about it. They don't want to plan. And that's why we're seeing an influx of people wanting to plan now, because all of a sudden it's become an emergency and people have ventilators on their mind and COVID on their brain. And what happens if I get sick and I don't have an estate plan in place? So suddenly business is booming for elder law attorneys and estate planners. But it's because before this, nobody wanted to think about it. Everybody wants to just pretend like we're invincible. And it's so hard sometimes to take that first step into planning. But once you do, the peace of mind that comes on the other side of it can really be invaluable.
Absolutely. Last week we had a really interesting guest on, Dr. Michael Wasserman. He really just to talk about the fears surrounding long-term care facilities, and he gave some really great perspective for families whose loved ones are in them. Are there any legal challenges or areas that family members should really be educated about right now if their loved one is in, say, an LTC building or an LTC community?
There, in terms of being in a facility, not so much, other than maybe just advocating for your loved one is always the big thing we talk about. Making sure that they have copies of your advance directives and powers of attorney and all those things on file so they know who they should be talking to, and those kinds of things. That's something we always talk to our clients about. If you update your documents, make sure you give the updated version to the facility. Make sure if you didn't have one previously and you do now, they have those things on file. For people that are maybe exploring going to a facility and they haven't yet, something we routinely talk to clients about is that most of those facilities will have you sign some kind of agreement when you enter. And it's a good idea to have an elder law attorney or somebody look through that for you to make sure that there's nothing in there that you're signing off on that you maybe don't realize or wouldn't be comfortable with. I've seen it before where they're trying to put like the power of attorney or the child on the hook as the payee. And if
Mm,
the parent can't pay anymore, you're kind of authorizing yourself that you're going to continue to do that. And we've been able to successfully navigate out of those for clients before. So a lot of times it's really worth it to take the time to have an attorney review something like that and see what you're getting into before you sign an agreement.
okay, so you guys do typically work even in those circumstances with a family member who may be in a long-term care facility
Mhm.
oftentimes. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the time. That was our 15 minutes. It goes fast typically, but I think the questions you answered there were, at least for me, the hot burning items. So is there anything else that you mentioned you guys are seeing a big influx of people wanting to do this. Is there anything else that you would typically want folks to leave with in terms of just information, knowledge, education?
Beyond just the legal documents, the other thing that we really talk to people about is just how you piece it all together. And it goes back to the communication thing again, but the legal documents, even the most well-written ones, are only going to do so much. There's going to be some gaps. And so I talk a lot about, leaving a supplemental letter to your family, whether it's going to be to the trustee of your trust, talking about if you have minor kids, how you want money to be managed for the kids if you're gone, or to the guardian talking about these are, my moral views, or these are the things that matter in our home. These are the ways we would want our children to be raised. Going back to the healthcare directives again, kind of outlining some of your intentions and your wishes and having that documented in writing too, because sure, you can have that family meeting now, but then if you don't get sick for 20 years, if you have something down in writing, that's another way that they can kind of reflect back and see what your intentions were. So I think organization and having the supplements that you need is really important. And that's the kind of planning that you're going to get by talking to an attorney rather than going on LegalZoom or something like that and trying to do it yourself. We hear a lot of people trying to do the do it yourself estate planning, and we end up oftentimes making more money on those cases on the back end when they kind of blow up later. So you get what you pay for. And I think finding an attorney that really specializes in this stuff is going to go a long way to try to help you make sure that your goals are carried out effectively.
Is there so just talking about connecting with someone like yourself, is there a search term? How does someone come to find, say, an elder care attorney? Is there a certification that you guys specifically have, or
Yeah, so there are oftentimes you want to look for, first of all, just practice areas. So there's a lot of attorneys that kind of dabble in everything, general practitioners and things like that. And not to say they wouldn't do a good job, but I really like to encourage people to look for somebody that specializes in the area of what they're trying to do. So I have a specialization through the Ohio State Bar Association. I'm a certified specialist in estate planning, trust, and probate law. So that's a designation you can look for. And my law partner, Brittany O'Diam, has a specialization, also the same one that I have. And then additionally, as an elder law attorney, both through the Ohio Bar Association and the National Elder Law Foundation. And I'm planning to take the exam this fall to get that certification too. So you can look for those kinds of credentials. There's a National Academy for Elder Law Attorneys. It's called NALA. If having a membership in that, I think, goes a long way to show that an attorney is really actively trying to pursue this stuff and staying on top of the laws. And, it's such a changing environment, and it's something that we really do have to stay on top of because the laws are constantly changing before our eyes. So it's a
Well, and
hot
those,
area right now.
and I would imagine those associations are probably good places to search, or to
Absolutely.
find or to connect with an elder care attorney in your area.
Yeah.
Because I would also assume it's probably best to find an elder care attorney in your area, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Especially, I mean, certainly in your state and then in your area, especially when it gets into more of the like Medicaid planning, nursing
Hmm.
home planning, because those things are county specific even. So I primarily practice, in 3 or 4 surrounding counties. And if I had, here in Dayton, if we had a client up in Cleveland, I would help them connect with somebody up that way, that would be more knowledgeable and knows the caseworkers and the kind of ins and outs of that specific county. So definitely finding someone local is going to be key in that situation.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for taking some time, like I mentioned, and I think people are going to get a lot of value out of this conversation. Thanks,
Great.
Kim.
Thank you again for having me.
All right. Thanks again so much to Kim for being willing to do this with us and sharing some of her knowledge base with our audience. I thought there was a ton of great content, ton of great answers there from Kim that are actionable for you all. Um, we did forget to mention in the conversation where you can find more from Kim. We'll try to have her website and her LinkedIn profile listed here in kind of the show notes. Again, she is a partner at O'Diam Estess Law Group here in Dayton, Ohio, so you could easily look her up there. They work primarily, obviously, with clients in the Ohio State area. So if you're out of that state, I think still Kim puts out a lot of great content on LinkedIn and her social media that's actionable advice as well too. So definitely worth looking her up. As always, please help us kind of spread this message, get as much awareness as we can. The videos so far have had a great response. We've seen them spread really, really exceptionally via social media. So thank you guys so much for doing that. Just like and sharing these videos so other people can get access to them. That's a huge help for us. It's a huge help for our community as well. So if you want to find out more about what we're doing, you can visit caregiving.com. There's been a lot of changes to the website. You can also follow us on Facebook, where we post really frequently. A lot of the content that we have on the website, we share on Facebook as well as our Twitter account. So on Facebook, it's at Caregiving Support, and on Twitter, it's at Caregiving. So look forward to seeing everybody, hearing from folks, and engaging more. One of the things you would have noticed if you were following us on Facebook is prior to this call, we put out a kind of a Q&A request from folks. So if you ever have questions for our experts, we pull those from Facebook and actually ask them during these interviews, as you noticed one from Terry from our Facebook group. So thank you to Terry for engaging. So if you'd like to have your questions answered or responded to, we look to Facebook and Twitter for those Q&A. So thanks again, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Bye now.